how much of the climate-related discourse intersect with, anti-globalist, anti-elitist, anti-Western rhetoric somehow in the extremist messaging? I mean, are there trends on that you can you can share with us?
I mean, when it comes to trends, the anti-establishment, anti-elite sentiment is what drives most of these, especially this belief that climate policies are somehow generated, driven, pushed for by the climate elites or the environmental elites. This is actually a coinage that is quite often used by the far right, but it's not only the far right. Again, we're bringing this back to the issue of trust. I think the pandemic has especially exacerbated these fears and these sentiments of anti-trust, the lack of trust in the institutions. And a lot of people on the left are also rejecting, and this is why I think that pandemic is possibly being a turning point when it comes to the trends. I indicated this before that in my research, the research that I've done with my colleagues, with Bernhard Fochner, with Louise Dean, now also with Ashton Kingdon and others, we found that there was a very visible shift in the pre-pandemic era on the far right from the outright denial of climate change, arguments such as climate change is a hoax, it's not happening, it has happened before, it's nothing new, it's being blown out of proportion, blah, blah. So a shift from those kinds of arguments to the forms of skepticism or forms of obstruction, which are going along the lines of, yes, climate change is happening, but the policies that are being pushed for by these environmental elites are not the right ones. So it's not good to introduce a carbon tax. It's not good to I don't know, standardize the pollution levels or the ban the certain standards of motors of car, the vehicles, etc., etc. So kind of going against very particular policy solutions. And I think that this was a very good strategy for the far right, because on the one hand, it helped them move away from this climate denialist aura, which has become counterproductive with the increasing evidence on the reality of the crisis. Climate change definitely is happening. There is ample evidence to support this. But at the same time, it has also helped them frame their own environmentalist profile, so to speak, where they kind of engage in very particular policy discussions on individual environmental issues. And this is where the far right was actually relatively successful in depending again on the case, on the context, on the country, etc. The pandemic, as I said, I think kind of halted this shift towards climate acceptance, or this yes but form of acceptance, because of this lack of trust in the institutions. And I think that it again reinstated the old forms of, we are not going to trust whatever, we're not going to trust anything that comes from the institutions, including climate policies. We're not going to believe that, I don't know, ban on single-use plastic is necessary for Germans, Montenegrins, Italians, people from Botswana or wherever, to not to be Eurocentric here. But we actually have to look for ourselves, look for our own, which again brings back this localist sentiment, this essentially skeptical sentiment. And another thing that is unfortunately happening here is it kind of brings back this parochialist tendency. I want to do not tell me what to do in my backyard. We started, you probably, most of the listeners or viewers have heard of the NIMBY movements, not in my backyard, which were the some of the early days of climate activism, some of which exist to this day. where local communities would rise up against harmful environmental projects in their vicinity. But I think that the far right is kind of this parochialism has amplified these trends, and even environmental protests are going along the lines of, we do not want something to be in our own backyards, but we don't mind if it is happening elsewhere. We don't mind. We're not interested in creating a universal alliance against these harmful practices, against these extractivist practices, against crackdowns and climate protests, insofar as this is not happening in our own backyard. So a lot of space for rhetorical maneuvering, which I think the far right has been using quite a bit. Again, the shift that I indicated was predominantly a shift, I believe, in public opinion. And what I notice again over the last 2 or 3 years is that the far right organizations are picking up on that trend. So they're kind of becoming ever more stronger in their climate denialism, or some of the organizations that I never heard have anything to say on the climate issue or the set of issues are now all of a sudden becoming climate denialists, saying, this is irrelevant. This is not something we should even be discussing.